The first stories in this collection were submitted by subscribers. Story 1 by Caitlin Brigham. I was about 19 at the time, living with my dad due to his disabilities. I cooked, cleaned, and more for him. He owns a 6-acre property. It's fenced off with barbed wire wrapping all parts of the property, except for a 20 to 30 foot gap between the two posts. We had deer and turkey hiding on our property. Keywords: we had. Mind you, we were in the middle of this little subdivision of little housing areas right next to Fort Leonard Wood. Our road was basically an old logging road. It's unknown to me if the Trail of Tears ran through the Fort Wood or not. There was ancient remains and artifacts inside caves. I do know my uncle's property does have the Trail of Tears running through it. You can still see the wheel marks. My baby brother was laid to rest there next to my ancestors' bodies. I had been walking along the wheel tracks of the Trail of Tears. I felt something watching me. I thought it was my older cousins being childish, so I yelled, "Haha, funny." There was nothing. Suddenly I realized there was no sound. No birds, no frogs, nothing. I stood still listening. Suddenly, my nose was filled with a sickly sweet smell of death. I recognized it well because my old cat used to bring a lot of dead things to the door. I started to look around and suddenly heard crunching. I called for my cousins, and it stopped. I then started walking. It started walking. I started running. It started running. I ran all the way to the dirt path that led up the hill. Suddenly, the running steps behind me stopped. I stopped and turned around, freaking out. All I saw were antlers in the shadows that slowly disappeared when my dad and uncle came down on the tractor. I tried speaking, but my words were stuck, so I pointed. I was then told to wait up at the house. They disappeared and came back half an hour later. There was no trace of what I saw, other than a dead animal, mutilated beyond recognition except for its white tail. We left, and slowly I forgot about it till one summer night I was sitting on the back porch listening to all the coyotes howl and yap. It was something I loved the sound of and was very used to. Sometimes I'd join in. This night I had joined in until I heard an animal, whether it was a dog or a coyote I didn't know, screaming and howling. It sounded in so much pain like it was being ripped apart. I was frozen in my place as my dog started barking and growling loudly. She's a Beagle Basset mix. I could hear footsteps like my dad walking up the stairs, but he was asleep, and it was coming from the woods. One of the old trees laying on the ground that was about the size of my calf snapped. Now keep in mind, my dad is 6'6" and about 350 pounds. He stepped on that tree, and it was fine. To hear it snap after someone else stepped on it shook me to the core. I heard a petrifying scream or coyote wailing sound before something was thrown at my dog. She yelped loudly and ran back to me. She launched into my lap before jumping and clawing over me to the door. I let her in and turned back once to see eyes and 2 horns. I quickly went in and threw the door closed, locking and chaining it. My dog had woken up my dad, and he came down and asked what was going on. I told him something was outside. He left the house with his pistol and our guard dog. He came in and said there was nothing there. The next morning I went out and looked for what hit my dog. It was a coyote paw and lower leg. From then on, smaller incidents happened. There would be something outside and walking around the house. Dogs going missing, no more coyote howls. The deer started thinning out on the property, and the turkeys. Sometimes we found their dead corpses mutilated and usually missing their heads. At first we thought it was our ex-neighbour's son who had already illegally killed a hawk, but even when he moved hours away, it was still happening. The last major thing that happened was late at night around 3 a.m. I was dyeing my hair and was just about to wash it when I saw an eye looking through the crack in the curtain that wasn't fully covering the window. It was almost pinkish, but more white. I moved to open the curtain when suddenly it drew away, and there were 2 loud thumps. I opened the curtain to see a dark form disappearing. The moon was just bright enough to see milky white antlers and the back of a deer skull. The rest seemed skinny and malnourished, but with black fur. I never saw it again, but I heard it. I could feel it watching me even when I slept. My dad never said say Wendigo. Just call it a window. You're asking for it to come then. I was startled by this, and even now he says it. At first I thought it was a joke from Fallout 76, but he's still saying it, and he's very serious about it, making me wonder if he saw something too. Before I continue to the next story, I just want to say thank you for choosing to watch this video, and I hope you're enjoying my narration. If you are, please go ahead and show your appreciation by liking this video and leaving a comment letting me know what you think of these stories. It really helps me out. Story 2. Submitted by Terrell Martinez. It was mid-October, and I was home alone while my dad and mum were out getting groceries. They told me they would be back in a few hours because they were going to Gallup, New Mexico, which is an hour away from where I lived. I was on my bed, video chatting to my friend discussing plans for a YouTube video, and I was going to get up to get a drink from the kitchen, and I heard a scratch coming from my window. My open-minded self did not think of it as a bad thing. Maybe it was the AC acting up again, I thought to myself. I had an AC unit for as long as I could remember. As I came back from the kitchen, I was pretty shocked to see that my curtain window was open. I did not think anything scary at first, but then I heard that same scratching noise coming from the window again. Now I started to suspect that this seemed strange. There was a foul smell coming from the ventilation system. It smelled like spoiled milk and rotten meat. My heart started to pound as if it was going to come out of my chest. As I got close to the window, there was a loud bang on it. It sounded as if a bird had hit it. My mind immediately thought it was my neighbours playing some sort of sick prank. And then I remembered they were gone for the weekend. I told my friend who I was chatting with on the computer, and he told me it was a skinwalker. I felt as if I wanted to throw up so bad because I could not believe this thing happening to me. I was in shock and could not really process what was happening. When I finally came out of my shock, I remember that I had some stored corn pollen and some ashes in my parents' closet. I immediately went to grab them and I retrieved the items, and as I was getting the items, I heard a coyote howl outside my house. That's when I knew it was a skinwalker. I did not know any Navajo, but I knew a projection prayer that a medicine man told me to pray if there was anything like this to happen. I went to every window and put ashes and cedar where the seal was. As I was done with the prayer, I went inside my room and locked the door and my windows. I sat on the edge of my bed waiting to see what would happen next. I received a call from my dad asking if I'm okay. I told them what was going on, and they immediately told me to stay where I am and not move. It seemed that they knew the trouble I was in was going to get worse. I was scared for my life. I did not know what to do, but all I could think of was to pray. I heard a noise down in the basement, as if there was something downstairs. I grabbed my arrowhead and my burning sage. I went to investigate. I slowly came down the stairs. As I was going downstairs, my legs gave out because of how scared and nervous I was. I reached the bottom of the stairs and looked to my left and right. As I looked to my right, my heart sank. Out of the window, I saw a very crinkly, weird human look-alike crouching at the window. I stared at it for a max 10 seconds. It had orange-yellow eyes, the colour of Gentinella herculus. It had long hair with white roots and a body painted black and white. I screamed from the top of my lungs, and I think my scream scared it away. I ran up the stairs and began to beg for forgiveness as if I committed a sin. I went to my room and slammed the door and began to sob because of how hideous the creature was. An hour passed by, and it seemed as if whatever it was gone. I was still shaken up. My mum and dad's vehicle pulled up to the driveway and I told them what happened. We didn't bother to call the police, but we called a medicine man. The next day, he did a protection prayer for us. Ever since then, the evil force was banished and never came back. I'm 18 now, and I live in South Dakota with my father. To this day, I'm still shook that whoever done this to me will receive the karma they deserve. Story 3 by Reddit user CoolKiller25. So I'm writing this at 5:10 a.m. on the morning this event occurred. The details are still fresh in my mind, so I'll try to be as detailed as possible. So, for some context, I live in the middle of Yee-Yeeville, out past nowhere. Like, my land puts the Wrong Turn movies to shame. But we don't usually have too much in the means of trouble out here. The occasional pack of coyotes, maybe a stray dog or two, but that's about it. There's always noises out here. We're surrounded by forest on all sides. Noises are to be expected. But the noise I heard tonight wasn't sounds of nature. It was downright terrifying. I'm used to some pretty creepy noises coming from the woods. I hunt and fish all the time, and I actually just go on walks and hike through the woods on our 50 acres of land. I know it all like the back of my hand at this point. I know every kind of animal that we have, and all of its predators. So tonight, my mum has her friend Jack come over to give me and my girlfriend Brooklyn a haircut. Her boyfriend David is also here. Well, I was about halfway done with my haircut when David came inside and pulled me out for a second. He knows I know these woods and these animals better than anyone. He told me to listen for a noise, and that's when I heard it. The noise, it almost sounded like a woman yelling. It was unintelligible what she was saying, but it struck me as a woman yelling, and something about it just bothered me to the core. I had that gut feeling that something wasn't right, that something wasn't what it seemed. I told David that he should just grab Mum and come inside, but he shrugged me off. Not like I blame him. See, I thoroughly believe in the supernatural and the paranormal. I just had an overwhelming feeling of dread and fear. I just went back inside and continued with my haircut. About 10 or 15 minutes later, I was just finishing up. My mum came into the house hysterical, screaming that something got David, and we needed to stay inside and lock the doors and windows. She went back outside and started screaming for David and saying she was going to call the cops. After a couple of minutes of yelling, we saw someone come stumbling out of the woods towards the house. It was David. He looked worn out, like he had just run a marathon. David was in the army and is in top physical shape, and he looked like he was about to just fall over and pass out. As he got closer, we realized he was hurt. Not badly, but enough to notice and warrant some concern. Mum got him inside and finally started to calm down enough to talk to us and explain what happened. She said they were just looking around for what was making the noise when they saw eyes watching them from the trees. Mum shined a light near them, and before she could say anything, David bolted after them. She tried to get him to stop, but he was gone. He told us that he had almost caught up to whatever it was he was chasing, when suddenly he got grabbed and slammed to the ground. He made it back to the house, and the only thing he could describe was a tall, spindly figure with no hair, beady eyes, and incredibly strong. Strong enough to lift him off the ground and throw him back down. I wasn't able to get a good look at anything solid, but after some pretty extensive research, this seems to fit the description of a Wendigo. If anyone has any information that might help me, please let me know. I don't really know what to do. I fear for my girlfriend and my little sister. Story 4 by Reddit user Personal Royale. Okay, I didn't know where to post my story, so I came here to see if anyone else has had similar experiences. This past summer, my husband and I were invited to a friend's cabin in Kentucky, not far from Red River Gorge. We had so much fun during the week going hiking and riding around on the four-wheelers, etc. Saturday was no different, and we had an awesome day out in the sun with a nice dinner planned out that evening around the fire. We were setting up outside, and I was joking around with our friend about me believing in Sasquatches and how they like to tree knock. He humoured me and found a 2x4 for me to knock against the trees. I excitedly knocked on the trees for a good bit until I was satisfied, but I didn't receive any knocks back. Soon, unfortunately, it started to rain, and I mean absolutely downpour, that ended up knocking the power out. We got the generator running, lit some candles, and cracked some windows while dinner was cooking. Now, our friend had already told us that there were numerous Native American burial grounds on his property, and we were already in the midst of the ghost stories. Dinner was soon done, and we were all eating around the table when I heard what sounded like someone talking right outside the back door. I immediately stopped eating and turned to the back door and asked our friend, "What was that?" He smiled at me and told me I knew exactly what that was, from the stories he had been telling us prior. I got up slow from the table and headed to the back porch and sat down on the stool. I listened closely, and the forest seemed to come alive. Amongst the whip-poor will calls there were voices, drums, music, and soon after there was whistling. Now mind you, the nearest neighbour was over a mile away, and they were an elderly couple, so there was no way that they would be making all this noise. My husband and our friends soon followed outside as well, and our friend recommends knocking on the trees again. I followed his direction and began knocking as loud as I could. Still, there was no knock back, so I walked back up to the porch and sat on my husband's lap listening to the music. The whistling continued, and we decided to humour it and whistle back the exact same way it had whistled. To our absolute nervous excitement, it began to whistle and pause waiting for our whistle. We whistled back for a while, and our friend decided to hit the hay with his wife. Not long after he decided to go inside, the whistling came to a stop, as well as the drums, music, and even the birds had gone silent. It was the eeriest feeling I had ever had, and chills ran down my spine when far off in the distance we heard a loud single knock on a tree. I opened my mouth in disbelief when a dragging sound broke the silence again. The sound was something heavy dragging what I thought were its feet through the leaves on the ground. It started off by the front gate where the knock had come from, and kept getting closer and closer until it finally made its way to the gravel surrounding the cabin. My husband whispered under his breath and said, "What is that?" We shined our flashlight down the side of the cabin to only see nothing. My husband pushed me out of his lap, and as a last chance to try and see what this sound was coming from, he grabbed my friend's thermal imaging device to see if whatever this thing was would show up on thermal. We were frozen in fear listening to this dragging noise approach where we were, and still we could see nothing. We were so scared we bolted inside, and I've never seen my husband that terrified as well as myself. Our commotion ended up waking our friend, and he came out of his room to ask what was wrong. We told him what had happened after he went inside, and we told him it was close to the side of the cabin. With the power still being out, we crept back into his room with the window still cracked, and we could easily still hear the dragging noise walking around the cabin. He built the cabin almost 20 years ago, and he had no words. My husband had no words, and I have never been so absolutely terrified but yet excited in my life. The next morning, I walked out onto the back porch, and the only thing that stood out to me was a single large footprint in the gravel. Story 5 by Reddit user Throwaway Farmers. Long post, but please read. I seriously need help and I'm terrified out of my mind. So I'll start off by saying I've never believed in anything paranormal. I'm a pretty science-based dude. I always look for a logical explanation, and I still am for this encounter. So if anyone has any ideas, let me know. I don't have much time for leisure with work recently. Been having to accept some pretty awful shifts to get by with COVID times. So I've lost my ability to go on my evening walks, which are a method of stress relief for me. It had been a while since I had gone on one, so 3 nights ago I decided to just go for a late night walk. I put on my headband flashlight and decided to take a path I hadn't in ages. There's a small trail near the back of my neighborhood that goes on for about 4 miles deep into the woods. My plan was to walk about 1.5 miles in and take the parallel path to come back. I make it down about 1.3 miles according to my Fitbit and start getting that feeling I'm being watched. I turn off my headlight and sit still to listen. At this point, I'm more concerned there's a guy following me who was up to no good. I heard clear footsteps in the leaves off the trail, and they'd been behind me for nearly 5 minutes. I stopped thinking it was an animal or another walker and became worried. Sitting there for probably 3 to 4 minutes and I hear nothing at all. I turn back on my headlight and decide to start walking quickly back home. About 2 minutes later, I hear footsteps again. This time, it sounds different. Sounds like 4 feet instead of 2 feet walking, and it's walking at the same increased speed I am. I turn around quickly with my headlight and my phone light and point them behind me. Silence. I get angry and yell out, "Leave me alone! I'm going to call the cops, and if you come at me, I have a knife." Silence. I yell again to get the f*** out of here and start walking towards where I heard the walking. About 20 yards out, hard to fully make out because the flashlight doesn't reach too far, I see what looks like a literal naked man running full speed on all 4s into the woods. Normally I chalk that sort of thing up to drugs, but my area does not have a drug problem. And there were some details that led me to believe it wasn't a person. For one, they were damn near hairless. Completely bald, pale white skin, and the way it ran on all 4s looked natural. Not like when you try to run on all 4s and look stupid. It looked like its bone structure was designed to walk on all 4s. There was no hunched look, and their back was flat and they were fast. The last thing that happened was straight out of a horror movie. I hadn't heard anything in a while behind me, but kept turning around to be sure. With about 0.3 miles left to go until I was in the clear, I hear a mad dash through the leaves. I whip around, and it stops on a dime. I see the edges of its head behind a tree and yell loudly to try and intimidate. What I heard next, I'll never forget in my entire life. It cackled like a monkey, a noise I've literally only heard in nature documentaries. The tone was that of mockery, a predator having fun with me. I didn't stick around. I sprinted as fast as possible back home. I'd love to believe this was some prank or some rabid bald diseased coyote, but I got a pretty clear look at it. It wasn't. It had human feet and human hands, a human head, and human buttocks, but nothing else about it was human. I called the cops after and told them a man was following me. I didn't want to say some creature because they think I'm crazy. They didn't find anything, but they did see quite a bit of activity in the leaves and dirt about 50 feet from where the trail was, leading far back into the woods before it got to a large stretch of grass where no footprints were seen. Please, someone, tell me that I'm crazy or that this was some elaborate prank or deformed man. So after some internal debate, I decided I was going to go back because otherwise it would eat me up not knowing what this was. When I first saw it, I had zero idea what it could be. I figured some drugged out or mentally ill man, a prankster, or a sickly deformed animal. After letting it all settle, though, there's just no way any of that was the case. I was trying to justify it in my mind because I've always been a very heavy skeptic of anything paranormal. Still am, to be fair, but I'm warming up to the idea that crawlers may actually exist. So I messaged 3 of my buddies, told them everything that happened in detail over text, and asked them if they'd come and look with me. Them, being non-believers like me, and also just loving adventure and spooky stuff, were more than excited to go. 2 of the friends have guns, and so do I, so we brought them. The other friend was in charge of holding 2 flashlights to give us some light. One being a phone flashlight so that he would be ready to take a picture at a moment's notice. We waited until about 9:30 p.m. when it was completely dark and headed down the same trail I did last time. My heart was pumping out of my chest, but I felt more confident having friends there. They were joking around and thought this was cool, and I tried joking back a few times, but the reality was I was pretty nervous. We walked the full 1.5 miles I had planned on walking last time and didn't encounter a thing. We had prepped for so long though we didn't want to give up quite yet, so we kept walking. About 5 or 8 minutes later, at close to the 2-mile mark, we started hearing some noises way back in the woods. It wasn't close, but it was loud enough for us to take notice. Bipedal footsteps made their way closer to us. Still far, but definitely coming our way. It sounded like they were wearing boots or something because the heaviness of the steps was quite loud. That, or there were a lot of leaves, which to be fair is a possibility. It was off the trail, so it's all woods back there. Once the footsteps made it about 20 or 30 yards away, I called out asking if someone was here. The footsteps stopped only for a brief second. A second later, the bipedal footsteps turned to what sounded like something sprinting on all fours our direction. My friend immediately turned on the flashlights, but there was nothing visible through the dense forest. At the beginning of the trail, the forest is pretty clear, but further back it gets a lot more dense, so it was hard to tell. Once he turned on the light, the footsteps stopped as well. None of my friends were talking. Paranormal believer or not, hearing that will scare the out of you. My friend, to my right, unholstered his pistol and kept it by his side out of fear. He looked at me and I could see he wasn't having a good time anymore. My friend holding the camera was visibly shaking and was darting his glance between all of us. The third friend to my left had a shotgun, shortly after yelled out into the woods, "I see you. Come out. Stop f***ing with us. We have guns. We'll shoot. I don't want to hurt you over some dumb joke. Come on now." We hear that sound again. I mentioned last time it sounded like a cackle. This time it was more of a yowl or shriek or aggravated noise. I don't even know what to compare it to. I just know it gave me goosebumps. My friend to the left of me immediately shot his gun into the woods, causing my ears to ring horribly due to me being next to him. I couldn't hear for shit, but I noticed his gaze went from the spot we heard the footsteps from over to the right of that spot, about 90 degrees. I followed his gaze and for about half a second caught a glimpse of, once again, a tall human-like thing running on all fours behind a tree. He started walking towards that direction, but my friend with the flashlight stopped him. He made the point that it was a buckshot. The chances he missed were slim due to the fact that the tree it was next to was covered in evidence that the shot was on target. My friend made a scary point that we hadn't considered. What if I hit it, but didn't hurt it? What if he was right? What if it took a shotgun hit and didn't even fall over? My estimate is that it was between 6 and 6'4", maybe between 140 and 165 pounds. So if it could still run after that shot, it either didn't get hit, or it's not something we want to mess with. We hear the cackle I heard the first time. That mocking noise. Not so much an aggravated noise this time, more so a noise that gave me the impression it was having fun or enjoying the fear we blatantly had in our voices. No more footsteps, but my friend to my left shot in its general direction again. Ears ringing again. I couldn't hear anything. But I did see a small glimpse again of it running off deeper into the woods. Could only see its rear for a second or two before it was too far off to be seen by the light. This meant it had to be running pretty fast. I don't want to give a number, but if I had to guess, it was easily around 20 miles per hour or so. Nothing a human could do on all fours, that's for damn sure. We turned around and jogged back home. Upon getting home, we talked about what we saw. Nobody was disputing my story now. We had all seen it. We talked all night. I showed them some of the comments on my last post where they suggested a crawler. We read a lot of posts here and some of them matched our experience. Some didn't. But we did all agree that if this was paranormal, that a crawler was the best guess we had. Now we are all on the same page. We still don't know if we buy into the paranormal claims, but this one is starting to convince us. We realise at the end we haven't even looked through the pictures. We asked my friend with the phone and he shyly admitted he hadn't even thought to take a single picture. I'm not going to lie guys, I was so terrified I didn't even open the camera app a single time. I was just trying to make sure it wasn't behind us or charging us. I'm sorry. We told him not to worry. None of us would have been any better about being calm enough to set up a picture. I never saw its face still, but the friend who took the shot swears it didn't have one. Or at least it had no eyes. He couldn't see if it had a mouth, but it was about 1/3 out from behind the tree and from his angle he saw it was blank from the nose area up. Or if it did have eyes, it was too black to be noticeable in the dark. We did all decide though, we're going to go back. We'll be more prepared next time. We'll do our research. Thank you for watching and/or listening to this video. Again, if you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit the like button. And if you don't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and select the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads. Again, also please leave a comment on this video. Let me know what you thought of the stories. Comments really help with the YouTube algorithm and will really help my channel to grow. If you have a story you would like me to narrate, please email me at mrsinisterstories@gmail.com. If you want to support my channel even further, there are a number of ways you can do so. You can consider leaving me a tip for this video via my PayPal, link is included in the description. Check out my Teespring store and consider purchasing one of my shirt designs. I have a new design with a Dogman, Wendigo and Skinwalker and Bigfoot all on a zebra crossing. It's a must for anyone who's into these types of stories. Some people have been asking in the comment sections if I've done any audiobooks, and the answer to that is yes. On Audible, there is a book, Punch by J.R. Park, that I narrated. I do get a small royalty if you decide to purchase that. It's a revenge/horror novel that was a lot of fun to narrate. I'd like to do more audiobooks in the future at some point. Lastly, the way you can really help me to grow is to share my content with anyone that you might think is interested in it. Thanks again.